to get started. It's 10:34 and people can just still come on as they can. So I would like to introduce to you Mrs. Rebekah Perry Franks. And she is the third generation of the Heritage Farm Perry family. She's a proud wife to Bradley Franks, mama to Theodore Teddy Franks, who will be a year old soon on the 13th?
On the 20th.
20th, okay. And she's assistant manager of Heritage Farm. She graduated from Otterbein University in 2018 with her degrees in zoo and conservation science and business administration. Since then, she has worked hard to expand the mission and educational outreach of Heritage Farm to include not only the cultural history of Appalachia, but also the natural history of Appalachia with the addition of a nature center and tree canopy walk and tree house. She also has founded her own nonprofit wildlife rehabilitation center called Hope for Appalachian Wildlife that has helped to rescue over 100 animals this year. That's amazing, Rebekah. Thank you. Thank you for being here and for all you do. And I'm going to let you take over.
All right. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I can.
All right.
Okay.
So welcome to Heritage Farm Museum and Village virtually. I'm sure many of you guys have hopefully been here to visit us before at some point. But let me tell you, if you haven't been in the past couple of years, lots has changed. This farm has transformed over the last 25 years from one museum building in an old dairy barn that my grandfather redesigned to be an Appalachian Heritage Museum to over 30 different structures, some of them being museums, some of them being artisan centers, animal facilities, playgrounds, a maker space, hands-on museum, and now we have an adventure park even with zip lines and climbing challenge courses. So this has become a major economic driver for the tri-state community, as well as a major nonprofit with the mission to restore hope to Appalachia by informing people of our proud past and our stories and what got us to where we are here today and how we can work toward a better future. So I'm here to talk to you today about the natural history things we have added here at Heritage Farm. Like Elizabeth said, I graduated in 2018 and I came home with all these ideas, you know. We were going to add natural history to the farm. We've always had our little petting zoo, but I really wanted to ramp up what we did with our animals here at the farm. After all, my big thought is we preserve all of these antiques and all of these stories to be able to preserve what brought our ancestors to this area, how they survived and thrived in this area, the tools they needed every day to get through, to conduct business, to conduct their household chores and everything. Why don't we preserve the animals that they had to use to be able to live as well? And that includes livestock and native wildlife. So I firmly believe that if we are going to talk about Appalachian culture at all, our domestic livestock and also native wildlife needs to be a part of that conversation. So that is why we worked hard to fundraise for our nature center and our tree canopy walk and tree house. So our nature center, and we're going to go in there here in a bit. Our fine cats are having an altercation. My apologies. They're all rescues and we love them all. Sometimes they have a tip. But the tree canopy walk is actually to get you up in the trees, up in the canopy, to be able to see things like the squirrels and birds and other tree life that lives in our diverse species of deciduous trees in our region. And it's especially pretty this time of year as some of the leaves are starting to change, and especially on into next week and the week after that. That will be definitely an awesome walk to do here in the fall. Also, the tree house has things like binoculars, a bird sound wall, and some taxidermied native wildlife species so that people can get an up closer look at those things. Inside the Nature Center, we have a lot of the hidden treasures of Appalachia. Marshall University's herpetology program helped me with designing a lot of their enclosures, and also with the acquiring from the wild of a lot of these animals. And they are frogs and turtles and snakes and salamanders, and those are some of what I'm going to show you. Elizabeth had said, friends, and I was like, well, they're not sorry what I'm going to be showing you today, but so we'll go ahead and take a walk on in there, and you can see what our nature center and our kind of foot in the door of talking about the natural history of Appalachia is like. So we can't talk about Appalachia without having a map of Appalachia, and local artist Tim Decker made this map of representation of all of Appalachia. I always feel the need to point this out to children because, well, and adults alike, a lot of people are not aware of just how large Appalachia spans. It goes all the way from New York down to Mississippi, the mountain range does. So we are right in the heart of Appalachia. Right here in Huntington, West Virginia is the dead center of all of Appalachia. So I think we should start calling ourselves the heart of Appalachia. But we are central Appalachia right here. And a lot of kids are like, Appalachia, what's that? And we don't talk about our region. They know about the Rocky Mountains. They know about, Mount Everest, and they know about other things like that, but they don't know about their own home mountain range of the Appalachian Mountains. And that's maybe because they're not traditional mountains. They are hills because they were mountains long time ago, and they have been around. They're the oldest mountain range that we know of, so that's why now they have eroded to hills. But that means that our ecosystems here in Appalachia are some of the oldest thriving ecosystems on our planet. So something's important there that we need to work to conserve. And a lot of animals choose to live here that don't live anywhere else. Appalachia has the largest number of species of salamanders anywhere else in the world. That's amazing. That means they don't choose the tropical rainforests. They don't choose just Florida, like a lot of other American wildlife. They choose Appalachia, and that's really important to know because we have clean water and we have a lot of water. We have riparian forest that comes right at the temperature they like, 55 to 75 degrees twice a year for their breeding. These are just things that people don't even know that we want to talk about here in this nature center. So we start that conversation with showing a map of Appalachia. And usually I tell the kids, if you are having trouble saying or remembering Appalachia, just think you're mad at someone in the cafeteria, you're gonna throw an apple at you. That's probably a bad role model, but it helps you remember it. Gonna throw an apple at you. So we start with some of our fish in our native fish tank here. We have a spotted bass out and about, and a lot of the others are hiding in the weeds. But we have our bluegill here, and there's a couple other as well. We have a sunfish, and we have a rock bass, and a little catfish that always just perpetually hides in the log. But we can't start the conversation about wildlife in Appalachia without talking about fish. Fish are actually, people think traditionally of eating fish as a coastal thing, but they forget that these river fish provided sustenance for our ancestors from the rivers, lakes, brooks, and streams throughout our area. And sometimes all you got for a meal is maybe a nice fat creek chub, and that got you through to the next day. Fishing is something that that we pass down generation to generation. Today, it's more of a recreational thing, but it's a skill that we shouldn't lose. It really goes down to our roots and goes down to being able to catch something quick and prepare it to be able to survive. And fish have provided that for humanity for thousands and thousands of years, so they shouldn't be ignored. They're quite important to our survival. And also, fishing and hunting are the two biggest economic support drivers for our division of natural resources. Kind of ironic, I think, that the hunting and fishing of animals, buying those licenses to be able to do so, is the greatest source of income for the conservation and preservation of our native wildlife in this state. So get your hunting and fishing license, even if you weren't going to use them, because it helps support our native wildlife conservation. Then we move from fish on to the next step, amphibians. So amphibians are like your frogs and your salamanders. So I mentioned we have a ton of salamanders in Appalachia, but we also have a big diversity of frogs. Cassie, I'm going to let you stick the camera in there and say hello to Lincoln, smiling in the log there. This frog is pretty awesome. If you look all the way in the back of the log, you can see him. His name is Lincoln. He is a pickerel frog. Pickerel frogs fascinate me because they have an adaptation called mimicry. They mimic actually a kind of frog that is known to be toxic to all wildlife that would try to eat it, so that they avoid predation. So these are one of the most common frogs we have around here because nobody eats them because they fear they're going to be toxic and poisonous. So we have pickerel frogs a lot. Pickerel frogs are some of the first ones you hear if you have a warm day in February and you hear frogs singing, probably pickerel frogs and spring peavers, or wood frogs, because they're all able to freeze over and thaw. That's an amazing Appalachian adaptation right there, because our winters do go from cool to warm, cool to warm. So instead of just having to do a whole winter-long hibernation, a lot of animals around here do what's called an estivation or a torpor, or the other word is not coming to me, I'm sorry, but they temporarily lower their heart rate and metabolism so that they don't have to eat or drink, and they don't have to expend that energy whenever it's so cold, so that they only have to focus on keeping themselves warm, or they completely let it go, freeze over, and as it warms up, their body systems can thaw and warm back up. And that's when they start singing, because they're trying to get as much food as they can during those temporary warm days. Then before they freeze back over, because as you know, the time period between November to March is like back and forth, back and forth. Well, they've adapted to that better than we have, quite frankly. We also have a salamander when we're talking about amphibians. I'm actually going to wet my hand before picking him up, because their skin has to remain a certain level of moist. So a lot of people see this and they would think it's a lizard, right? Well, lizards and salamanders are not related. Lizards are reptiles, and they have scales, and their scales are what keep them warm, and they have lungs to breathe. This is a salamander. It's an amphibian. They breathe through their skin, and then they also can live in and out of water. That's what it means to be an amphibian. You've heard of an amphibian submarine. That's the same thing. You can be in and out of water. This newt is one of the most fascinating creatures we have in all of Appalachia. This newt, we have no idea, but it could be 15 years old, because newts start out their life as tiny, practically microscopic organisms with gills that hatch from tiny, smaller than frog eggs. And the few that do survive not getting eaten at that stage turn bright red and move to be a more terrestrial salamander, which means they spend more time on land. That bright red makes animals think that they would be toxic to eat, and so most of them do survive from this stage to adulthood. And then they will be in this stage for at least 2 years before they get to this. So they are at least 3 years old when they're an adult, and they can live to be 12 to 15 years old. That's a long time for something this small. And during that time, they will eat millions of insects. Salamanders are some of our most unknown insect control critters. They eat the larvae of insects that a lot of times you can't really see unless you flip over rocks on the bottom of creeks and see mosquito larvae, dragonfly larvae, and even like leech larvae and things like that. They will eat that so that less of those things reach adulthood. So they help control the levels of pond pests, if you will. As you can see, they move very slowly. They are cold-blooded. They have to warm up to their surroundings. However, they do prefer a little cooler than your typical reptile. Like I was saying, this time of year is actually their favorite. They love temperatures between 55 and 75 degrees outside, and they love the rain. And that's when they go to breed and lay their eggs is during those times of year. So your best shot at seeing salamanders of any species out in the wild here in Appalachia is in the spring and fall when it's raining. So I don't know if you can get a good camera angle at all of our bullfrogs. Maybe not. But our bullfrog is our largest species of frog that we have in the area. And our ancestors ate them too. And they were often easier to attract. They will eat just about anything. You can throw out a dead mouse and you might be surprised when it's not a stray cat that gets it, it's a bullfrog. So our ancestors who lived near creeks and ponds would often go quote frog digging and be able to catch bullfrogs and eat their legs just like a tiny little chicken leg. It sounds crazy, but what our ancestors had to do to survive, these animals helped provide sustenance for us. And they provide other services for us, like keeping us from deadly insect-borne illnesses. Just like I was talking with the salamander, these guys eat a lot of insects. They'll eat mosquitoes, they'll eat flies, two of the biggest insect-borne illness carriers that bite humans and then transmit those illnesses into our blood. So bullfrogs and other frogs alike and salamanders are some of our best friends when coming to protecting humanity. And people don't realize and give them enough credit. They're just doing their thing, but they're in turn helping all of our ecosystems, including humanity, survive and thrive. Shut that back good because he's got a powerful mouth. You know what's still a good connection for you guys? Sometimes when I get over here, the connection starts to be wonky. I'm going to assume we're good. Okay. So over here we have one of our states. We've moved on. We've gone fish. We've gone to amphibians. Now we're going to talk reptiles. So the difference between reptiles and amphibians, a lot of people are really unsure. They just pass them all off, write them all off as creepy crawly slimy things. But reptiles are totally different. Amphibians live in and out of water. They breathe through their skin, and they also have that smooth skin. It's membranous, mucousy. And everything in the water goes through that. So they're a lot more vulnerable to, say, water pollution and whatnot. That's another thing I forgot to mention is it's a good indicator of a healthy stream or river or creek if there's a lot of salamanders and frogs around it. And there's documentation in diaries and journals kept by our ancestors exploring this area that actually were able to figure out that, oh, this is a good clean drinking water source because I saw all these newts here, or I saw all these frogs here, because they are able to tolerate that water quality. Pretty awesome. So on to reptiles, sorry, that was a little side tangent. Reptiles have scaly skin. It is not smooth. I mean, it is smooth, but in a different way. It's not slimy. They're not slimy. They're scaly. They feel like your fingernail. So smooth but hard. And it's actually a lot like your fingernail. It's made out of that same keratinous substance. However, they act like individual mirrors. They attract the sun and then they warm up their bodies that way, so that they are able to heat up from their surroundings. So whatever temperature it is outside or in their surroundings is what temperature the reptile is. And this is our favorite snake in the Central Appalachian region. This is a black rat snake. His name is Ratatouille. Black rat snakes are arguably the most important snake that we have in our area. Why? Because they control the venomous snake population. They'll eat the eggs and young, and even sometimes adults, copperheads. But also they help largely with our rodent control. So again, controlling rodent-borne illness and disease. And they will keep the mice and the rats away, which to our ancestors, that was extremely important for crop storage, to keep the mice and rats from ruining it. So a lot of people purposely, if they saw these, relocated them near their barns and storage bins, because they would help protect them from rodents that would come and either poop in that storage and ruin it, or eat it as well and also ruin it for human consumption. Today, if you see a black rat snake, please do not kill it. Honestly, they are more afraid of you than you are of them. If you just keep your distance, they will serve you and you will not harm them. They will eat your mice and rats in the area and they will mind their own business. If they found their way into your house, do not use sticky traps, please. Whenever you use those sticky traps, that snake is not able to survive being peeled off of that trap, because when the scales are removed in the wrong direction, it feels like your fingernails being ripped off. Like, it's very painful to them and they rarely survive it. So please do not use sticky traps. Please call someone to come and get it if you are not comfortable relocating it just back outside and finding how it got in and sealing that back up, because we really want to keep these guys around and we do not want their population numbers to decrease, because if their population decreases, rat and mice populations and copperhead populations increase. So the black rat snake is your friend. I do want to show you something very important. The black rat snake baby looks a lot like a copperhead. So if you zoom in there a little closer, Cassidy, but you can see that the black rat snake baby difference between the copperhead up here, the copperhead is a lot of a fatter snake. They're skinnier. And also the copperheads will have that diamond shaped head and they will have just a regular ovular head. So please do not mistake baby black rat snakes for copperhead babies. Now we're going to move on to my favorite reptile, the turtle. It's probably most people's favorite reptile, but specifically my favorite is the eastern box turtle. And I'm going to get Squirt out here. This might be one of the single most fascinating creatures we have in Appalachia. This thing has evolved to be able to entirely enclose itself in its shell, head and all four legs, which is actually not common for most turtles. Most turtles cannot put in their back legs and sometimes cannot even put in their front, just only their heads. So they're able to disguise to look exactly like a rock and blend in to be able to survive long amounts of years. And they also are extremely protective of their territory. They may range the same square mile for all 50 years of their life. And that may be the only box turtle or three that live in that area. So if you see a box turtle crossing the road, you want to just help it to the other side, not relocate it somewhere else, because turtles can actually get very confused, especially the older they are, and disoriented when moved habitats, because they are just so used to that turtle's eye view of that square mile and are totally disoriented if you move them anywhere else. Box turtles, as a lot of people don't know, are also omnivorous. So they eat both plants and meat. So they'll eat insects and mice or frogs. I've seen this girl tear apart mice and worms, but also they eat vegetation. If you see a little triangular bite out of a strawberry or a tomato in your garden, probably one of these guys. Red is one of the only colors they can see. They can only see green and red, and then everything else is in shades of brown. So that's why your kale or your strawberries are particularly attractive to these guys. But they are amazing. This is their backbone, actually. This is their spine that has grown to protect them, and this is their ribs. So all turtles are that way. Their carapace is actually their backbone and their ribs. So they can feel you touch this. So because their spine, just like ours, has sensory nerves and a spinal cord inside of it. So never let your grandkids knock on or throw a turtle, because it is very harmful to them. And also, don't let them paint your turtle to see that it's the same turtle every year. I know that's fun, but it ruins their camouflage, and odds are, if you've had a turtle that's come back every year with the same colors, that's just a very lucky turtle, and probably means you don't have raccoons to predate them in the area, because painting anything on the shell ruins that hard work they've made for that camouflage. Didn't actually close. What do they do during the winter? Well, here's that third word, they vermate, which basically means that it's the reptilian version of hibernation, where they just go completely cold under the ground. They don't even have to have circulation, and they completely shut down whenever it is consistently below about 50 degrees, so soon here. And then they come back up when it's going to be consistently above 50 degrees. And let me tell you, they are way more reliable than Punxsutawney Phil's grandpa. You should rely on box turtles for when it's really going to be spring, because never have we ever had our box turtles here come up before the last freeze was over. They just have that sense. They're buried down in the ground, and they can tell when the ground is going back up for good. It's amazing. I'm gonna feed here Cosmo, our red-eared slider. So Cosmo, red-eared slider, you may be like, oh, I've seen them in a pet store. You once upon a time may have been a purchaser of a turtle that's like that tiny, and all of a sudden it got way too big and you released it in a crate. That's these guys. They are not originally native to this area, actually. However, they have made themselves at home, which technically qualifies them as invasive, but they have still become an important part of our creek ecosystems in a strange way. They've somewhat taken the spot of the yellow-bellied slider, which was the native slider around here, and also was one of the main turtles that our ancestors would have captured for food. Turtle soup, yum. I've never tried it. But these guys would be easy to lure into traps with minnows or even just bread. They'll eat just about anything. And then our ancestors would be able to harvest them, and they're actually quite meaty. So they did provide our ancestors sustenance. Also, same thing with turtles as it is with the frogs and amphibians. If there were turtles in a water source, it's an indicator of better health, except for snapping turtles. They are the exception to the rule. Snapping turtles can live in the most putrid, polluted waters ever. They've adapted to do so, which has worked well for them, but they are no longer indicators of good water quality. Speaking of snapping turtles, we have one. I insisted we get this snapping turtle for our nature center because so many kids just see a turtle, even like the eastern box turtle, and are like, "Is that a snapping turtle?" Because they've just heard all the tales about snapping turtles and they've never actually seen one. They've heard their grandpa say, "Yeah, I almost had my hand bit off by a snapping turtle when I was fishing," and they're like, "Oh my gosh, snapping turtles." So actually, when I saw this snapping turtle heading as a baby into our chicken coop, it was, the chickens would have eaten it. I picked it up and was like, you know what? We're going to keep this baby snapping turtle so we can show kids what snapping turtles actually look like and how their reflexes actually work. And it's been a big hit. So I'm going to throw these red wigglers, just bloodworms that live in the bottoms of most all creeks and especially polluted ones. So because they've evolved to really eat these, and these guys can live anywhere and are about the only food source along with leeches in extra polluted waters, these guys have staked their claim on them. All right, let's see him go after him. Usually, unless he's already been fed today. Has he already been fed today, Cassidy? No. Well, our turtles also are slowing down as the weather cools down as well, so he may not be as hungry, but usually their reflex is to automatically stick that neck out and snap at anything that wiggles or moves, including your fingers. So that's why we always tell kids, never stick your hand in a hole when you're playing in the creek or down near the river or a lake or pond, because likely there is a snapping turtle that is living in there and he will think your fingers are food. Nope, I don't think he's hungry right now, but he'll find me later. My third animal is actually taking a backtrack back to salamanders, but they're housed over here because they are more a terrestrial salamander, because they actually have lungs. So they're kind of an intermediate between reptile and amphibian, but they are amphibian all the way, and they still need that moisture. This is a spotted salamander. How incredible is that creature? Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but hardly ever seen. Just like the people of Appalachia, our wildlife is often underappreciated, undervalued, and ignored, quite frankly. But look at how incredible this animal is. Absolutely beautiful, yet spends most of its time under the ground. It comes out at night, especially on cool, rainy nights, and eats a lot of insects. These guys even eat ticks. So they help control our tick populations. But they can only live in the healthiest of soils and the cleanest of waters. So keeping our environments clean and healthy will continue to help these guys be able to help us. The spotted salamander is actually the salamander cited most in exploration journals as the best indicator for healthy soil for farming and healthy waters for drinking. So these guys have helped our ancestors for years, and they only live here. They only live here in Central Appalachia. This is where they've chosen to be their home. And aren't they cute? They look like they're always smiling. They also live a long time. They can live 15 years in this tiny little body. I mean, it's big compared to the newt, but and they prefer moist soil. So that's why you saw he was under his water bowl there. So spotted salamander, I love. They're absolutely incredible, gorgeous, and underappreciated. So I'm gonna put them back in there. Back with their water. And with that, I'm showing you our first step around here to integrating the natural history with our cultural history. Has a pan to this beautiful mural that Tim Becker did as well, showcasing some of the other wildlife in this area. Expansions from here forth would include being able to mammals and avian species that are native to this area. Currently, we have a possum, but we just need to be able to fundraise to build the appropriate enclosures for those type of animals. As Elizabeth said, I do have my own wildlife rehabilitation center, and I release most of these animals on this wildlife sanctuary property. But those animals that are unable to transition back to the wild, whether they become too habituated to humans or they have an injury or illness that otherwise prevents them from being released, we would love to be able to give them a home here and be able to have a second chance educating the public about more native wildlife that we have. So that's a big fundraising goal for the future for those types of enclosures. We'll head back outside for our Q&A because I know the service is best out there. And like I said, we also have an adventure park, which gets people up on top of the mountain, zipping over the beautiful Appalachian Mountains and climbing atop them. And the whole theme of that is conquering challenges, just like our ancestors had to in order to live and thrive in the mountains. So everything here at Heritage Farm connects back to that mission of being able to not only survive, but to thrive here in Appalachia. And that includes today and for the future. We encourage children and adults alike to go away from here inspired by what they have learned to make and continue to make Appalachia a beautiful place to live, survive, and thrive. Thank you for having me speak to you. And now I'll answer your questions.
I have one on rescuing turtles.
Okay.
When you have a turtle out in the road and you stop to rescue it, should you always put it on the side of the road toward which it was headed instead of putting it back where it came from?
Yes, because turtles are pretty one-track minded, and if you put them on the back where they started, they'll just start crossing right back across the road again. And typically when they are crossing a road, it is to get to a different water source. Or even in the ditch alongside that road. So putting them in the direction that they were headed in is 99.9% of the time the right thing to do, unless there's danger on that side of the road that makes you not want to place a turtle there, i.e. maybe a loose dog that seems interested in it crossing the road, or construction or something like that.
Do they bite the little box turtles? Because I've done that a couple of times, and I got to tell you, I'm scared to death. I'm like, don't bite me. But I've done it. I've stopped traffic one time, and honestly, the cars behind me all were very nice because they knew I was moving this turtle to the direction in which he or she was going.
Yeah.
But did they ever nip at you, or do they just kind of go in?
So rarely will a box turtle ever bite you. Their necks are not long. They are not able to reach out and
reach back.
snap
Okay.
around like, say, a snapping turtle.
So maybe get them a little further back.
Forward. And so if you are worried about them biting you, you can hold them by just the back of the shell, like a sandwich.
Okay.
And they won't be able to reach your hands, even if they are out and not in.
Okay, good to know. I've done it. We had a black snake on our back patio summer before last, and it got quite aggressive. I mean, really aggressive. Like, it didn't, well, I'm not going to tell you. It got very aggressive. My husband was trying to get it, like to move it, and it came at him.
Well, and that's a natural defense, especially if it's a mother that has a nest nearby in the springtime. However, with black rat snakes, and they will bite. I don't want to give false information. They will bite,
right.
but
they're not poisonous.
They're not venomous, and they are far less likely to bite than most other species that we have around here. They are mostly all for show. And if you can move them without having to pick them out, like with I have one of those putt ball return scoop things. that I can use, or any other long hook or long tool or even cleaning utensil you can get them to crawl up onto and just somewhere else. That's the safest way rather than picking up with your bare hands. Because
no. It was in a window well, and he was just kind of gonna coax it out, and it came after. It was like real aggressive.
Yeah,
So.
well, think about you if you were trapped in a little tiny room and somebody way bigger than you came at you, you know.
Rebecca, what's your phone number?
Yeah.
I will give you all my phone number because that's what I give. That's my wildlife rescue hotline too. So 304.
Oh, you're.
I'm supposed to give you your number. No, I don't care. I don't care. You can call me.
Oh, I was just kidding.
Oh no, I'll give it to you. No, I'll send it in an email to Elizabeth, and any of you who are actually really interested in needing to know for wildlife emergencies can get that from her.
That's good. That's actually good to have, because we live in the city, and we've had 2 of those up against our house, and it's just, if you don't know them and you don't know how to handle them,
It can be scary.
It scares the heebie-jeebies out of you.
I agree.
And that's, I know that you're not supposed to kill them because they do a lot of good, but they scare you at the same time. So yeah, it might be good to, since you have a wildlife rescue.
Odds are they're finding food around your house, so that you want to be able to keep them around. Yeah,
it's wooded kind of where we live, and it's yeah, we have fox and we have deer and we have black snakes, and yeah, black snakes are the most scary for us.
I'll take the phone from you so you can. Thanks, Cassidy, for being our camera girl. So she is able to return to animal care. I will take the phone for the rest of the Q&A. Thanks, Cass.
Who else has a question for Rebekah?
Rebecca, since nobody else is asking right now, are there hellbenders around here?
So they are critically endangered. They used to be a lot more abundant. Same thing like what I was saying with some of the other salamanders, except for the hellbenders are extremely sensitive to pollution. So they really only exist in the rivers that we've really worked hard to keep clean, like the New River and the Gauley River and stuff like that in our state. They are less common around here.
What is a hellbender?
It's a gigantic salamander. And it's like, I mean, not gigantic, but it's like, it can be up to 3 feet long.
Wow, that's gigantic to me.
During the 2016 flood in Nicholas County, my daughter went out and she found one up on a hillside after the waters had gone down. Yeah. And there were state policemen out there, you know, checking, be sure everything was okay. They wouldn't touch it. She picked it up and put it back in the river. Well, but one of them wouldn't get near it, and one put his finger on it.
They don't have teeth. They don't even have teeth. So there's no reason to be afraid of picking them up.
But they're big.
They are.
Oh. Rebecca, you picked up those salamanders and they just crawled around on your arm, and I think salamanders are really interesting, but I've never been able to get near enough. When you get near enough and they take off. Now, are these trained salamanders? Do they recognize you or your touch?
Well, actually, so, I mean, trained, I wouldn't necessarily say because they're not necessarily trainable, but conditioned to public presentation, sure, because once I caught them from the wild, I continuously made it a habit to handle them each day, especially around feeding time, so they learn like, oh, okay, this touch comes with reward, so they're all about to get fed and stuff, and then they just are conditioned to it.
So if somebody else came along to pick them up, they might not want to stay as long with them.
Possibly, but honestly, most people who work here, we don't let people who don't work here handle them. Most people who work here, they don't mind.
Thanks.
Rebecca,
Mm-hmm.
we have a little lizard that lives in our garage, and I don't want to harm it, but could I catch it and release it? Like, can I get a little cage or anything? I would never do anything like those sticky things.
Yeah.
Those are horrid. But how can I rehome this little lizard? Because he leaves a trail of lizard excretions.
Yes.
And I just really don't want him in my garage, but I don't want to. And the other day, he ran right in front of me. I have a fish net because we have a koi pond. I thought, oh, I can catch him. He's too fast.
Yeah, the
How
fence
can I-
lizards are extremely fast.
How can I catch him? I don't want to harm him.
So here's what I will say. I will say that you can catch him, but what will happen is unless you find where he's getting in and out of, it'll be a moot point because he'll just keep coming back
Oh,
in.
I want to move him like two miles away.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I want to rehome him. But would I get a small like hamster? How would I actually catch him without harming? I mean, I can't catch him with my hand. He's too fast.
So the best thing to do, honestly, and it's difficult, it is not easy, would be easier to, what I normally recommend to people is to chase them outside and then seal wherever they're getting in, because it's very difficult to
I'll
capture
never
them.
find it. Yeah, I'll never
So,
find it.
crickets, you can buy them for short
Ooh.
cents at
Ooh.
any pet store. But that is honestly what it is most likely coming into your garage for is crickets.
We don't have any crickets.
Well,
We don't.
you may without knowing, but or other insects. But
I mean, the
best
garage is
thing-
attached to the house.
yeah. The other thing that you can do is you can buy, they're called Have a Heart live traps,
Yeah.
and they're just like this big, and they're used for mice. But if you put like some honey or other things inside of it and then left it with the door open, it will go crawl in there after that, and it may even crawl in there because it looks like a nice little cave, you know. And then the door shuts on it. And then you can just open the door whenever you want to release it, wherever you want to release it, and never have to touch it.
Right. I'm going to try that because I don't want to harm him, but he doesn't need to live in my. Well, we find him outside too, and he
I
goes. We
understand.
have. He goes up under the. We have that hardy plank siding, and he goes up under the siding. Like, I'm never going to find. And at the garage, there's little spaces where the trim is, where he can get. I couldn't begin to seal every little nook and cranny, but anyway,
yeah.
well, thank you for that. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
I don't want to harm him, but I want him out of my garage. So,
Sure.
We had a skink in our house for 3 days.
a what?
And
A
a skink.
what?
A skink.
What's that?
It's like a little lizard.
Okay.
And I got a bowl, a clear bowl, and we finally, after 3 attempts, we dropped the bowl on top of him, stuck a piece of stiff cardboard under the bowl, and then carried him out. But they're quick. And while we were doing that, his tail came off, which is a
Yeah.
defense mechanism. Yeah. Which was creepy to look down and see that tail.
Because it keeps wiggling after.
Freddie, that reminded me, we had friends staying with us a couple years ago, and there was a little girl, and she was 11, and we're all having breakfast, and she said, oh, yeah, I saw a lizard in your family room. Well, my husband's eyes got this big. He's like, what? So he and my daughter went in there, and Scott was ready to use a sweeper to get rid of it because I don't know. But anyway, they caught it, put it in a baggie and released it. So it's probably my freeloader still. But anyway, yeah, but they were able to catch it. I think it was kind of stunned by being inside. I don't know, but it was still in the family room in the corner where she is. Oh my gosh. You'd think we live in the hills of Appalachia. Any other questions for Rebecca?
I think it was a great presentation, and I think going out to Heritage Farms is one of the most enjoyable things you can do for any age group, from the kids to us.
Thank you. That is what we strive to do, is have something fun for everyone.
And we could schedule a tour anytime we feel, the group feels like they're ready to, because we're just being very COVID careful, as you can
Sure.
imagine.
And I mean, we can do virtual tours of other things as well. We've done virtual tours of our museums, virtual artisan experiences, and things like that too. So you can always keep that in mind.
Because this is a great presentation. I loved it. But the one you did for Rotary was more about your farm animals, because you had different, like you had your little, is it an otter you have?
Possum.
Possum, Perry possum, right?
Yes, Perry the
Yes,
possum.
Yes.
Yeah, and I
So-
still have possum, but it was feeding time for possum, and picking up possum during feeding time is.
Oh, that's okay. Well, go ahead, Dr. Muffson.
Yeah, I had a question. To what point are you able to keep all of this going during the winter time? Do you have to make very many adjustments for cold weather?
Yeah, so actually our building is has even got a generator, so that like for the big ice storm we had last year, the generator for the only building that had a generator was our nature center, to be able to keep all the animals warm and all the tanks filtrating. So yes, there are lots of provisions having to keep them at the right temperature, humidity, and water flow.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions before
Thank
Rebecca?
Well, if not, I thank you all for letting me talk to you all this morning. And if you guys are interested in a petting zoo tour, I could also do that as well.
That's
if
the
you would
one.
like.
I think
Okay,
that's the
sorry.
one. I didn't know what to
Sorry.
call it.
I've done so many virtual presentations for people. I get mixed up as
Oh,
to
sure.
what I've done. But I hope you enjoyed this.
Oh, this was, absolutely. This was fascinating. Yeah, honestly, I have not seen that nature center. That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. Oh, no.
It opened up right before COVID happened, so a lot of people haven't seen it yet.
Right. But we may have you back for an encore, because there's a lot more you can show us. So we might have you on our speed.
The possibilities are practically endless. Yes.
I know. Oh, I knew your grandfather, and I know your grandmother. And I remember seeing the very first building, the Progress Building. And wasn't that the first building at Heritage Farm?
Yep.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I was able to, I haven't been out there in a while, but kind of watch it grow. But I remember back in the day, that very first building, and Mike's vision is just amazing. And you all are just doing an amazing job. It has really
Thank you.
Oh, it's just, we're lucky to have it, honestly.
We thank you all and hope you'll all come out and experience it when you feel safe to do so. We are taking a lot of proper COVID precautions and limiting capacity, and people have to wear masks inside buildings and stuff. So it is pretty safe to come in person if that's something you choose to do.
Oh, we'll talk about it and see how we feel. Otherwise, I'm sure I'm going to be inviting you back, because there's more. There's so much to Heritage Farm. You couldn't begin to do it in one session anyway. So, thank you.
Something we could look forward to in the spring, which
Absolutely.
and hopefully COVID will be, if not gone, at least better.
Right.
I would sure hope.
Yes. All right. Well, Rebecca, thank you. This was absolutely wonderful and fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.